The warning lights flashed red across the command deck of Border Station 7. Admiral Keth stared at his main display screen with growing alarm. Something impossible was happening right before his eyes. A massive ship signature had appeared. On their sensors, moving slowly through the outer defense grid. The problem was simple yet terrifying. Nothing should have been able to get that far. "Run the scan again," Keth ordered his sensor operator. A young Vortani named Plex. The purple-skinned alien's 4 arms moved quickly over his control panel. But the results remained the same. "Sir, the readings are correct. There is definitely a large vessel moving through Sector 7 Alpha. The computer identifies it as a human battleship based on the energy patterns." Plex's voice shook slightly as he spoke. Keth felt his stomach drop. Human battleship. The word seemed impossible. Humans were supposed to be a minor threat at best. Their technology was basic, their ships slow and clumsy. The Empire had been raiding human colonies for years without any real resistance. Could one of their ships have penetrated the most secure border in Vortani space? "Size estimate?" Keth asked, though he dreaded the answer. 3 kilometers long, sir. Mass readings suggest heavy armor and weapons systems. The ship appears too. B designated Terra's Wrath based on communication intercepts. 3 kilometers. It made it larger than most Imperial cruisers. Keth had commanded this border station for 15 years. He knew every piece of equipment, every defensive system, every automated platform between here and the edge of Vortani. Space. Nothing that size should have been able to slip through undetected. "Show me the defense grid status," he demanded. The tactical display lit up with hundreds of points of light. Each one represented an automated defense platform, equipped with plasma cannons and particle beams, powerful enough to destroy a capital ship. Every single one showed green status, fully operational, and scanning for threats. Yet somehow Terra's Wrath had glided past them all like they didn't exist. "Sir," called out his communications officer, Lieutenant Mora, "I'm picking up strange energy readings from the human ship. The patterns don't match anything in our database." Keth moved to her station and studied the energy signature data. The readings fluctuated in ways that seemed to defy physics. A ship appeared solid one moment, then seemed to fade from sensors the next, only to reappear seconds later in a slightly different position. "Could it be some kind of cloaking device?" he asked. "I don't think so, sir. Cloaking technology hides a ship from sensors, but this is different. It's like the ship is there and not there at the same time. The defense platforms can't get a weapons lock because their targeting systems keep losing the target." The implications hit Keth like a physical blow. If the humans had developed technology that could fool Vortani targeting systems, then everything had changed. The Empire's military superiority was built on their advanced weapons and sensors. If those advantages were gone, then the balance of power in this sector of the galaxy had just shifted dramatically. "Contact Fleet Command immediately," Keth ordered. "Priority 1 emergency signal. Tell them we have a human battleship that has breached our perimeter using unknown technology as Mora worked to establish the communication link." Keth watched Terra's Wrath continue its steady progress toward the inner systems. The ship moved with purpose, following a direct course toward the heart of Vortani space. This wasn't a lost vessel or an accident. The humans had sent this ship here deliberately. "Sir, I have Fleet Command on the line," Mora announced. The main screen flickered and showed the stern face of Admiral Zorth, the sector commander. His scaled skin had taken on the darker shade that indicated high stress in Vortani physiology. "What is this nonsense about a human breakthrough?" Zorth's voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded fleets for decades. "Sir, we have visual confirmation of a human battleship that has penetrated our outer defenses. The ship is using some kind of technology that our systems cannot track or target effectively." Zorth's expression changed from annoyance to concern. "Show me." Keth transferred the sensor data to Fleet Command. For several long minutes, Zorth studied the information. When he looked up again, his face had turned even darker. "How is this possible? Our intelligence reports indicated that human technology was decades behind ours." "I don't know, sir. The evidence is right there. This ship has capabilities we don't understand. What is their heading? Keth checked the navigation display. Direct course for the core system, sir. At their current speed, they'll reach the inner worlds in 48 hours. Zorth was quiet for a moment, clearly thinking through the implications. A human ship with unknown capabilities heading straight for the Empire's most important worlds was a nightmare scenario that no one had prepared for. I'm dispatching Fleet Group 7 to intercept, Zorth finally said. Commander Jorik will lead 12 heavy cruisers to stop this ship before it gets any deeper into our territory. Sir, with respect, if our defense platforms can't target this ship, what makes you think our cruisers will have better luck? Because Zorth replied grimly, we don't have a choice. We cannot allow a human vessel to reach the core systems. Political implications alone would be catastrophic. If other species learn that humans can penetrate our defenses at will, it could spark rebellions across the Empire. Keth understood. The Vortani Empire controlled hundreds of worlds and dozens of species through a combination of military might, and the belief that resistance was hopeless. If that image of invincibility was shattered, the Empire could face uprisings on multiple fronts. Maintain tracking on the human ship and provide all data to Commander Jorik's task force, Zorth ordered. And Keth, this information is classified at the highest levels. If word of this leaks out before we resolve the situation, it could mean the collapse of everything we've built. The communication ended, leaving Keth alone with his crew and the impossible sight of Terra's Wrath continuing its journey through Vortani space. The ship seemed to mock their best defenses simply by existing. Oh, whatever the humans had discovered, Tay had changed the rules of the game completely. As he watched the human battleship disappear into the distance, Keth couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. If humans could build one ship with these capabilities, how many others might be out there, hidden in the darkness between the stars? The thought sent a chill through his bones that had nothing to do with the station's climate controls. Commander Jorik stood on the bridge of his flagship, heavy cruiser Dominion's Edge, watching his task force prepare for what might be the most important mission of his career. 12 of the Empire's most powerful warships surrounded his vessel, their crews ready for battle. Each ship carried enough firepower to level a small moon. Yet Jorik felt uneasy about their chances against a single human vessel. The intelligence briefing had been disturbing. A human battleship had somehow slipped through the Empire's most secure defenses without triggering a single alarm. The ship used technology that their best scientists couldn't explain or counter. Now it was his job to stop Terra's Wrath before it reached the core systems and potentially sparked panic throughout the Empire. Navigation. Set course for Intercept Point Alpha, Jorik ordered. Maximum speed. The task force jumped into hyperspace, racing to catch up with the mysterious human
ship.
Jorik had studied every piece of available data during the journey. The energy readings made no sense according to known physics. The ship seemed to exist in multiple states at once, solid enough to register on sensors, but somehow intangible. 2 weapons systems. Lieutenant Commander Vex, his tactical officer, approached with the latest intelligence update. Sir, we're receiving new data from Border Station 7. The human ship has changed course 3 times in the last hour, but each course change seems impossible. Explain, Jorik said, though he suspected he wouldn't like the answer. The ship was heading directly toward the Kelter system. Then it simply vanished from sensors for 6 minutes. When it reappeared, it was 30 light-years away, approaching the Nexus trade routes. No ship can cover that distance in 6 minutes, even using our most advanced hyperspace drives. Jorik felt the first stirrings of real concern. The humans could move their ships instantaneously across vast distances, then traditional naval tactics were useless. How do you fight an enemy that can appear anywhere without warning? Any theories on how they're doing it? Our science officer believes it might be some form of dimensional manipulation, but that's supposed to be impossible. The energy requirements alone would be enormous. The task force dropped out of hyperspace near the Nexus trade routes, sensors scanning for any sign of Terra's Wrath. The area was busy with commercial traffic, hundreds of cargo ships from across. The Empire carrying goods between the outer colonies and the core systems. Contact the traffic control center, Jorik ordered. Find out if anyone has seen our target. Within minutes, they had their answer. A Talarian freighter captain reported seeing a massive ship appear out of nowhere, scanned his vessel briefly, then vanish again. The description matched Terra's wrath perfectly. They're hunting for something, Vex observed. That scanning pattern suggests they're looking for specific ships or cargo. Before Jorik could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the fleet. Terra's wrath had reappeared, this time directly above them at a distance of only 50 kilometers. The human ship was enormous, its dark hull bristling with weapons that seemed strangely organic in design. All ships, target the human vessel and fire at will, Jorik commanded. 12 Imperial cruisers opened fire simultaneously. Plasma beams and particle cannons lit up space with enough energy to vaporize an asteroid.
Ow.
But as the weapons reached their target, something impossible happened. The beams passed right through Terra's wrath, as if the ship wasn't there. Direct hit on all weapons, reported the tactical officer, confusion clear in his voice. But sensors show no damage to the target. In fact, sensors are having trouble maintaining a lock on the ship at all. Jorik watched in amazement as Terra's wrath seemed to flicker in and out of existence. One moment it was solid and real, the next it appeared translucent, like a ghost ship from ancient legends. "Sir, incoming transmission from the human vessel," the communications officer announced. "Put it through." The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of Terra's wrath. A human male in a simple uniform stood at the center of the image. He appeared calm and confident, showing no concern about facing 12 Imperial warships. "I am Captain Reed of the Earth vessel Terra's Wrath," the human said. "I'm impressed by your response time, Commander. Your reputation for efficiency is well-deserved." The fact that the human knew his name and rank sent another chill through Jorik. How much did they know about Imperial operations? "Captain Reed, you are in violation of Imperial space. Surrender immediately, or face the consequences." Reed smiled, an expression that somehow seemed more threatening than reassuring. "I'm afraid I can't do that, Commander. My mission is too important." "Yeah, but I want you to understand something. We're not here to fight you. We're here to send a message." "What message?" "That the age of Imperial dominance is ending. Humanity has evolved beyond your ability to contain us." As if to demonstrate his point, Terra's wrath suddenly accelerated to impossible speeds, moving through the Imperial formation like it was standing still. The human ship's weapons remained silent, but its mere presence was more intimidating than any show of force. "All ships, pursue and engage," Jorik ordered, but even as he spoke, he knew it was hopeless. The Imperial cruisers gave chase, but Terra's wrath seemed to be playing with them. The human ship would appear on sensors, allow the Imperial vessels to close the distance, then vanish just as they came within weapons range. Each time it reappeared, it was in a completely different location, sometimes behind the Imperial ships, sometimes above or below them. "Sir, this is impossible," Vex reported. "We're moving through hyperspace without generating the usual energy. Signatures. Our navigational computers can't track their jumps because there's no jump to track. They're just disappearing and reappearing." Jorik realized with growing horror that they weren't just chasing a ship, they were chasing something that operated by completely different rules. The humans had clearly made some kind of breakthrough that rendered traditional space combat obsolete. "Captain Reed," he transmitted on an open channel. "What do you want?" The response came immediately, Terra's wrath reappearing directly in front of the Imperial flagship. "I want you to deliver a message to your Emperor, Commander. Tell him that humanity is no longer content to be the victim. We've been studying your empire for years, learning your weaknesses, developing the tools we need to level the playing field. And if the Emperor refuses to listen, then he'll discover that we've learned to do more than just make our ships invisible. We've learned to make them go places that should be impossible to reach." With that ominous statement, Terra's wrath flickered out of existence once again. This time, it didn't reappear. Sensor sweeps of the entire system revealed nothing. Human ship had simply vanished, as if it had never been there at all. Jorik stood in the silence of his bridge, contemplating the implications of what he had just witnessed. The Empire's military doctrine was based on controlling space through superior firepower and numbers. But what good were weapons if they couldn't hit their targets? What good were numbers if the enemy could be everywhere and nowhere at once? Opened a secure channel to Fleet Command, knowing that his report would send shockwaves through the Imperial hierarchy. The humans were no longer the primitive species they had once been. They had become something far more dangerous, an enemy that could strike anywhere while remaining untouchable themselves. The Imperial Palace on Vortani Prime had stood for over 1,000 years, its massive towers reaching toward the sky like spears thrust upward in defiance of the gods. Emperor Vorth sat upon his throne in the Great Hall, surrounded by the symbols of his vast power. Representatives from hundreds of worlds bowed before him daily, bringing tribute and seeking his favor. Today, however, the usual ceremonies had been cancelled. Something far more urgent demanded his attention. Admiral Zorth stood before the throne, his scaled face showing the strain of the past few days. Behind him, several of the Empire's top military commanders waited nervously for their emperor's response to the unprecedented situation they faced. "Tell me again," Vorth commanded, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. "How does a single human ship simply appear above our capital world?" Zorth cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Your Majesty, Terra's Wrath materialized in orbit 17 minutes ago. Our orbital defense platforms immediately locked onto the target, but their weapons cannot achieve a solid lock.
Ow.
The ship seems to exist in a state that our targeting computers cannot process." Emperor Vorth had ruled the largest empire in this sector of the galaxy for 40 years. He had conquered dozens of worlds, crushed rebellions, and brought entire species to their knees. The idea that a single ship from a primitive human colony could penetrate his defenses and hover above his throne world was not just impossible. It was insulting. "Have you tried simply firing everything we have at it?" he asked. "Yes, Your Majesty." Da-da-da-da-da-da. Every orbital platform opened fire simultaneously. Da-da-da-da. The energy beams passed through the target without causing any damage. "It appears the human vessel can somehow shift between dimensions, making it intangible to our weapons while allowing it to remain visible to our sensors." Before Vorth could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the palace. Emergency lights bathed the throne room in red as communication systems activated on their own. Every screen in the chamber flickered to life. Showing the same image, the bridge of Terra's Wrath, Captain Reed appeared on the displays, standing calmly despite facing the concentrated firepower of an entire planetary defense system. Behind him, human crew members worked at stations that looked surprisingly advanced compared to Imperial intelligence estimates of human technology. "Emperor Vorth," Reed said, his voice carrying clearly through the palace communication system. "Thank you for your attention. I apologize for the dramatic entrance, but I needed to ensure that my message would be heard." Vorth rose from his throne, fury building in his chest. No one had ever dared to address him without permission, especially not a member of what he considered an inferior species. "Human, you will surrender immediately or face the full might of the Imperial fleet," Vorth declared. Reed smiled politely. "I'm afraid that won't be possible, Your Majesty. See, I'm not here to surrender. I'm here to deliver an ultimatum." The word ultimatum sent murmurs of shock through the assembled courtiers and military officers. In the history of the Empire, no conquered species had ever dared to make demands of the Emperor. "You have 72 hours to release all human prisoners currently held in Imperial detention facilities," Reed continued. "You will also immediately cease all military operations against human colonies and withdraw your forces from human space." Vorth felt his heart pounding with rage. Audacity of this human was beyond belief. "And if I refuse, then you will face consequences that your empire cannot imagine or defend against. We are no longer the helpless victims you once hunted for sport, Your Majesty. Humanity has evolved." To demonstrate his point, Reed gestured to someone off-screen. Suddenly, Terra's Wrath began to move, gliding through the orbital defense grid like the platforms didn't exist. Plasma cannons that should have vaporized the human ship fired continuously, their beams passing harmlessly through their target. As you can see, Reed explained, your weapons cannot touch us, but our weapons can certainly reach you. The human ship's main guns began to glow with an ominous energy. Instead of firing, however, the weapons discharged their power into empty space. Where the energy beams struck, reality itself seemed to twist and bend. A space folded in on itself, creating a brief window that showed a view of distant stars. It was a demonstration, Reed said calmly. We can open doorways through space itself. Your ships, your stations, your worlds, all are within our reach, regardless of distance or defenses. General Crix, the Emperor's chief military advisor, stepped forward. This is impossible. No species has mastered dimensional manipulation. To this degree, Reed turned his attention to the general. You're correct that no species has achieved this level of control over dimensional space. But humanity isn't just any species, General. We've always been good at finding solutions, too. Impossible problems. Emperor Vorth studied the human captain carefully. Reed showed no signs of stress or concern despite facing the combined might of the Imperial fleet. His confidence seemed genuine, not the bravado of a desperate commander making empty threats. Even if your claims are true, Vorth said, you are still only one ship. The Empire has millions of vessels at our disposal. True, Reed acknowledged. But numbers become irrelevant when your enemy can strike anywhere instantly while remaining untouchable. How do you fight a war against opponents who can appear in your most secure facilities, accomplish their objectives, and vanish before you can respond? As if summoned by his words, reports began flooding into the throne room. Human prisoners were disappearing from maximum security facilities across the Empire. Surveillance recordings showed them simply walking through solid walls and vanishing. Guard posts reported brief appearances of human soldiers who seemed immune to weapons fire. Impossible, General Crix muttered, reading the incoming reports. These facilities are in different sectors, hundreds of light years apart. No force could coordinate simultaneous operations across such distances. Reed overheard the comment. You're thinking in terms of conventional space travel, General. When you can step between dimensions, distance becomes meaningless. A soldier can be on one side of the galaxy in the morning and the other side in the afternoon. Implications hit Emperor Vorth like a physical blow. If humans could transport troops instantly across interstellar distances, then every world in the Empire was vulnerable. No defense could stop an enemy that could appear anywhere. Without warning, what assurance do I have that you'll honor any agreement? Vorth asked. You have my word as a representative of humanity, Reed replied. We're not interested in conquest or domination. Simply want to be left alone to develop in peace. Release our people, stop your raids on our colonies, and we'll withdraw from Imperial space. And if we agree to these terms, you'll share this dimensional technology with us. Reed's expression hardened slightly. I'm afraid that's not possible. This technology will remain under human control. Consider it insurance against future aggression. The throne room fell silent as Emperor Vorth weighed his options. He could refuse the ultimatum and face a war against an enemy his forces couldn't touch. He could agree to the terms and maintain peace, but at the cost of acknowledging human superiority in a crucial area of technology. 72 hours, Reed reminded him. I'll be waiting for your answer. The screens went dark, leaving the Emperor and his advisors to contemplate a decision that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. Outside, Terra's wrath continued its silent orbit above the capital, constant reminder that the age of unchallenged Imperial dominance was coming to an end. Dr. Zane had not slept in 36 hours. The Vortani scientist hunched over his analysis station in the Imperial Research Center, surrounded by data streams that painted a picture more terrifying than any nightmare. His 4 eyes burned from staring at screens, but he could not rest. The fate of the Empire might depend on understanding what humanity had achieved. The sensor data from Terra's wrath made no sense according to established physics. The human ship seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, shifting between layers of reality at will. But that was only the beginning of the mystery. Reports were flooding in from across the Empire that suggested humans had weaponized this dimensional technology in ways that made traditional warfare obsolete. Doctor, his assistant Plex, called from across the laboratory. We're receiving another batch of security recordings from the Kelter detention facility. Zane activated the holographic display and watched footage that defied explanation. A human. Prisoner previously secured in a cell built from the strongest materials in the Empire. Simply stood up and walked through the wall. The metal didn't melt or break. The human passed through it like it was made of air. Other prisoners followed, moving through barriers that should have been absolutely impenetrable. Run the molecular analysis on the cell walls, Zane ordered. The results appeared instantly. The metal showed no signs of damage, alteration, or molecular disruption. Whatever the humans were doing, it left no trace that Imperial science could detect. A priority communication signal interrupted his analysis. General Crix appeared on the main screen, his expression grim. "Doctor, I need answers." Were the humans doing this? Zane rubbed his tired eyes before responding. "General, based on the evidence, I believe the humans have achieved something we thought impossible: controlled manipulation of dimensional barriers. And they're not passing through solid matter. They're stepping around it by moving through parallel dimensions. Explain it in terms I can understand." "Imagine reality as a book with many pages," Zane said, calling up a simplified diagram. "Most species exist on one page at a time. The humans have learned to read between the pages, to exist in the spaces we cannot perceive or defend against." General Crix studied the diagram with growing alarm. "What are the military implications?" "Catastrophic. Humans can move through dimensions at will, then every fortification, every defense system, every secure facility in the Empire is useless. Walls cannot stop enemies who can simply step around them through dimensional space." Before Crix could respond, new alarms began. Sounding throughout the research center, emergency reports flooded the communication system from military bases across 3 sectors. "Sir," a trembling communications officer announced, "we're receiving distress calls from forward base 17 in the Outer Rim. They report that human forces have somehow appeared inside their most secure bunkers. The attackers seemed immune. 2 weapons fire and disappeared with critical intelligence data." General Crix's face darkened. "How many humans?" "Unknown, sir." Surveillance cameras show brief glimpses of figures that seem to phase in and out of visibility. Guard posts report being attacked by enemies they couldn't see or hit. Ain't. Dr. Zane felt his stomach clench as the implications became clear. The humans weren't just using dimensional technology for defense or escape. They were using it for military operations that rendered Imperial security measures worthless. "There's more, sir," the communications officer continued. "Similar reports are coming in from bases in 7 different sectors. Human operatives have appeared simultaneously at facilities thousands of light years apart, suggesting coordinated operations across impossible distances." Zane turned to his analysis computers, calling up star charts that showed the affected installations. The pattern was clear and terrifying. The humans had struck targets that contained information about Imperial military capabilities, troop movements, and strategic plans. They weren't random raids. This was systematic intelligence gathering on a massive scale. Dr. General Crix said urgently, "Can we counter this technology?" Zane studied the data for several long minutes before answering. "Not with current Imperial science. We would need to fundamentally rethink our understanding of dimensional physics. The energy requirements alone should make this impossible, yet the humans are doing it routinely." "What about detection? Can we at least see them coming?" "Our sensors are designed to monitor 3-dimensional space. If the humans are moving through higher dimensions, we might not detect them until they choose to manifest in our reality." The scope of the problem was becoming clear. The Empire's entire military doctrine was based on controlling territory through fortified positions and superior firepower. If humans could appear anywhere without warning and disappear before retaliation was possible, then traditional military strategy was obsolete. "Sir," Plex called from his monitoring station, "I'm detecting unusual energy readings from orbit." Dr. Zane switched his display to orbital sensors and immediately wished he hadn't. Terra's wrath wasn't alone anymore. Faint energy signatures suggested the presence of other ships, hidden in dimensional space around the capital world. "How many?" General Crix demanded. "Difficult to determine," Zane replied, his voice shaking. The energy patterns suggest at least 12 vessels, possibly more. They're maintaining dimensional phase, invisible to direct observation, but occasionally bleeding energy into our reality. The revelation hit like a hammer blow. While the Empire had focused on the single human battleship making demands, an entire fleet had been positioning itself around their most important world. The humans had been watching, studying, preparing for operations that Imperial forces couldn't prevent or predict. Doctor, in your professional opinion, what are our chances? In a direct military confrontation with this technology? Dr. Zane looked at the data one more time, hoping to find some weakness or limitation that might provide hope. Instead, he found only confirmation of humanity's overwhelming tactical advantage. General, with current Imperial technology, a direct confrontation would be hopeless. The humans can strike anywhere while remaining untouchable themselves. They can appear inside our most secure facilities, gather intelligence or rescue prisoners, and vanish before we can respond. Traditional military tactics are useless against an enemy that doesn't exist in our dimension until they choose to attack. General. Crix was quiet for a long moment, clearly processing the implications. What about economic warfare? Supply line interdiction? Sir, if they can move through dimensions, then distance becomes meaningless. You could strike supply convoys anywhere. In the Empire simultaneously, our trade routes, our resource extraction operations, our communication networks, all are vulnerable to attack by forces we cannot see coming or defend against. The communication system activated again, bringing reports of more human operations. This time, the targets were different. Human strike teams had appeared at Imperial slave processing centers, freeing not just human captives but members of other species as well. The raids were precise and efficient, targeting facilities that most of the galaxy didn't even know existed. They're not just rescuing their own people, General Crix observed. They're exposing our operations to other species. Dr. Zane nodded grimly. The humans appear to be making a statement about Imperial treatment of conquered populations. Other species learn that humans can free slaves from any Imperial facility. It could inspire widespread rebellion. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place. The humans weren't just demonstrating military superiority, they were undermining the Empire's political control by proving that Imperial dominance was no longer absolute. Every species that had submitted to Vortani rule because resistance seemed hopeless would now know that liberation was possible. Doctor, how long until the 72-hour deadline expires? Zane checked the chronometer.
18 hours, sir. And in your opinion, what will happen if Emperor Vorth refuses to meet their
demands? Looking at all the evidence, the dimensional technology, the simultaneous operations across vast distances, the systematic intelligence gathering, the coordinated liberation of prisoners, Dr. Zane could reach only one conclusion. Believe the humans have been preparing for this moment for years. They've studied our weaknesses, mapped our facilities, and developed the technology to exploit both. If the Emperor refuses their ultimatum, I fear we'll face a conflict unlike anything in Imperial history, a war against enemies who can strike anywhere while remaining beyond our reach. Emperor Vorth stood alone in his private chambers, watching the final hours count down on the human ultimatum. Through the massive windows, he could see Terra's wrath maintaining its silent orbit above the capital. The human ship had become a symbol of everything that was changing in his empire, a constant reminder that the old rules no longer applied. The past 72 hours had brought reports that shattered his understanding of galactic politics. Human operatives had simultaneously struck dozens of Imperial facilities across thousands of light years. Prisoners had been freed, intelligence stolen, and secret operations exposed to the galactic community. Each success demonstrated that humanity possessed capabilities far beyond anything Imperial scientists had imagined. General, his expression told the Emperor everything he needed to know about their military situation. The analysis is complete, Your Majesty, Crix said quietly. Dr. Zane's team has confirmed our worst fears. The humans can deploy forces anywhere in the Empire without warning. Our defenses are useless against dimensional manipulation technology. Vorth turned from the window to face his most trusted advisor, What are our options, realistically? Surrender. Or face the systematic destruction of everything we've built. The humans have demonstrated that they can penetrate any facility, free any prisoners, and strike any target while remaining completely immune to retaliation. The Emperor had ruled for 4 decades by making hard decisions based on practical realities rather than pride or tradition. The evidence was overwhelming. Continuing to resist would be suicidal for the Empire. Contact Captain Reed, he ordered. Inform him that the Empire accepts his terms. Within minutes, the main display in the chamber activated, showing the bridge of Terra's Wrath. Captain Reed appeared calm and professional, showing no sign of triumph despite achieving what should have been an impossible diplomatic victory. Emperor Vorth, Reed said with a respectful nod. I'm pleased that you've chosen the path of wisdom. Your terms are accepted, Vorth replied through gritted teeth. All human prisoners will be released within 24 hours. Imperial forces will withdraw from human space immediately. Thank you, Your Majesty. I want you to know that humanity bears no ill will toward the Vortani people. We simply refuse to be victims any longer. Captain Reed, Vorth said, his curiosity overcoming his anger. How long have you been planning this operation? Reed considered the question carefully before answering. We've been working toward this moment for 15 years, Your Majesty. Ever since your forces first attacked our colonies, we knew that we would eventually need to level the playing field. Dimensional manipulation was the key to achieving that goal. 15 years, Vorth reflected. While the Empire had been treating humanity as a minor irritation, human scientists had been developing technology that would revolutionize warfare itself. There is one more thing you should know, Reed continued. Terra's Wrath is not alone. We have a full fleet in dimensional space around your capital world. The colleagues have been observing Imperial operations, studying your military capabilities, and mapping your strategic vulnerabilities. The revelation sent another chill through the Emperor. How many ships? Enough to ensure that any future aggression against human interests would be met with overwhelming force. But as I said, we're not interested in conquest. We simply want to be left in peace. General Crix stepped forward. What assurance do we have that you won't use this technology against us in the future? I have my word that humanity will not initiate hostilities against the Empire. However, any attempt to resume slave raids or attacks on human colonies will be met with immediate and decisive response. Reed paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. We've also taken the liberty of sharing certain information with other species in the galaxy. The location of Imperial slave processing centers, details about forced labor operations, evidence of systematic oppression. I believe you'll find that many of your subject species are suddenly feeling much more confident about their prospects for independence. Emperor Vorth felt his heart sink. The political implications were staggering. If humanity had indeed shared intelligence about Imperial operations with other species, rebellions would be breaking out across the galaxy within days. We're ending. A stability built on fear and oppression read corrected. The galaxy is about to become a much more interesting place, Your Majesty. Species that have lived under Imperial rule for generations now know that resistance is possible. As if summoned by his words, urgent communications began arriving from across the Empire. Rebellions had indeed begun on a dozen worlds simultaneously. The rebels seemed unusually well informed about Imperial troop movements and supply lines, suggesting they had received detailed intelligence from human sources. This is freedom, Reed replied, something humanity understands very well. Emperor Vorth realized that his empire was facing a complete transformation. The old order, maintained by military superiority and the belief that resistance was hopeless, was crumbling in real time. Species that had accepted imperial rule for centuries were suddenly discovering that liberation was possible. What happens now? Vorth asked. Now you adapt to a new reality, Reed said. The Empire can continue to exist, but it will need to find new ways to relate to its neighbors. Ways based on mutual respect rather than fear. And if we refuse to change? Reed's expression hardened slightly. We've been very busy these past 15 years, making contact with resistance groups, sharing technology, building alliances. The galaxy is no longer as isolated as you once believed. The scope of the human operation was breathtaking. While the Empire had dismissed humanity as a minor threat, human agents had been building a network of allies and preparing for this exact moment. They hadn't just developed new technology, they had created a coalition capable of challenging imperial dominance. Our intelligence services detected none of this, General Crix said in amazement. Your intelligence services were looking for conventional threats, Reed explained. Worlds communications sent through standard channels. We operated entirely through dimensional space, invisible to your sensors and immune to your interdiction efforts. Captain Reed gestured to someone off-screen, and the tactical display behind him showed a star map of the galaxy. Dozens of systems were highlighted in blue, indicating human presence or influence. This map shows systems where humanity has established relationships over the past decade, Reed explained. Some are human colonies you didn't know existed. Others are worlds where we've been secretly supporting resistance movements. All are now part of a defensive alliance that will make future imperial expansion significantly more difficult. Emperor Vorth studied the map with growing amazement. The humans had established a network spanning hundreds of light years, all while remaining completely undetected by imperial intelligence. The strategic implications were staggering. You've been preparing for war, he observed. We've been preparing for peace, Reed corrected. But peace on our terms, not yours. The age of imperial expansion is over, Your Majesty. From now on, every species in this galaxy will have the choice to determine their own destiny. The communication ended, leaving Emperor Vorth and General Crix alone with the wreckage of their assumptions about galactic politics. Outside, Terra's Wrath began to move, slowly departing from orbit as its mission was completed. What are your orders, Your Majesty? Crix asked. Vorth considered their options carefully. The Empire still controlled hundreds of worlds and possessed vast military resources. But the foundation of their power, the belief that resistance was futile, had been shattered permanently. Begin implementing the human demands, he ordered. Release all prisoners, withdraw our forces from human space, and prepare for a very different kind of galaxy, and the rebellions. Let them proceed. Attempting to suppress them now would only demonstrate our weakness further. We'll need to find new ways to maintain influence, ways that don't depend on fear and superior firepower. As Terra's Wrath disappeared into the darkness between stars, carrying with it detailed intelligence about imperial capabilities and weaknesses, Emperor Vorth contemplated the new reality his empire faced. Humanity had achieved something unprecedented. In galactic history, they had forced a major power to back down without fighting a single conventional battle. The human ship had been more than a vessel. It had been a symbol of change that would reshape the balance of power throughout the galaxy. Other species would look at humanity's success and realize that even the mightiest empire could be challenged by those with sufficient determination and ingenuity. The old order was ending, replaced by something uncertain but potentially more hopeful. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy would be shaped by cooperation rather than conquest, by innovation rather than intimidation. And at the center of this transformation stood humanity, no longer the victims of galactic politics, but one of its most influential players. The age of human expansion was about to begin, and the established powers could only watch and wonder what other surprises this remarkable species had prepared for the galaxy.